Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. I've just put this video up as the fifth in a series and will be the last, I guess, in respect to what I would see as a history of mankind, far different than I certainly was taught at school, and a history that I've learnt from the rocks and the messages left on rocks and that have led me to Egypt. If you haven't seen all of the videos I've posted, I strongly recommend you do, or you probably will not understand what we're talking about, but in brief, we are, up to this point, have gotten to a stage where we are aware the planet has been tipped off its axis, rotated around the sun in an unnatural manner, and it has been done so by people that had the ability to do so. Okay, I wanted to start with this just to clear up if any of you are unsure as to what this unnatural cycle is. Imagine, if you would, the Earth spinning around the sun on this line, okay, in the opposite direction, okay, and we currently perceive ourselves to be going, because we perceive ourselves to be going in this direction, okay. So we'll be going in the wrong direction and perceive ourselves to be going around here. The sun is in the middle. When we get to here is where the comet strikes us. We don't go around the sun in that direction. What we do is the plane that our planet is on, this, the plane that our planet turns on begins to move, and it moves downwards like this till we get to here. Like, that's halfway through the cycle. Now the sun, or the planet I should say, through the whole cycle retains its north-south aspect. So in other words, while it's cycling around like this, it keeps cycling around the sun, but the plane it's on moves. And this plane can only move one half a loop. Okay, it can only go from here, down there, and back up there. And the reason for that is that when we hit the plane of the sun, which is here where we left, okay, this is the plane of the sun that we were travelling on, which was incorporated the plane of the earth. We have to pull our plane out of the plane of the sun, because that's how it works. When it gets hit, it actually is really difficult for it to get it up far enough to get it out of the plane of the sun. It actually has to pull it out sideways, not upwards. So when the planet is rotating on this plane and it's moving, right, it ends up in 3,000 years after the start of this event, where we are travelling with the North Pole and South Pole staying where it is, but up here and up there is not a very nice winter nor summer. I've just left Praveen's head in here. Excuse me, Praveen, again, but it's his work, and I didn't want him to go without a mention. I watched his documentary about this feature here in central India in a temple. I will go back and discuss also in greater detail where this tells us exactly how many thousands of years our inner solar system was modified by an event whereby our twin star system became a single star system with one sun as we know it today. So we'll discuss that, as well as we'll also discuss at the end whether or not this parchment, which I've already said reflects the manner in which the very three comets themselves, in the sequence they hit the planet, in the 6,000 years that the unnatural cycle took, but it may very well be reflective of the population both before and after the event. Well, now we know exactly how planet was treated as such when it rotated around the sun in such a manner. We had, a couple of months every year where summer was summer and winter was winter, definitely. And the part of the planet that was livable was a very, very small part in the middle. I would expect, and without touching too much on religious grounds, that even from a logical point of view, if where you're getting to live, and there's so many of you, is getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed to a smaller portion of the planet where you can live, well, quite honestly, you couldn't eat animals, you couldn't afford to run, you know, cattle or whatever, or goat or whatever on a land, because they'd eat all your land. You would need every bit of land you want to keep as many people as you could for grain. Feed far more people an acre of grain than you will an acre of cow. But let's move on now. Now you'll just note I brought the diagram of the Serapeum in Egypt back up again now, just to display to you that this is also another one where we're just seeing the motion that's getting tracked here is the plane of our planet and its return back to the plane of the sun. This part of the structure here is referring to a previous event. I have seen two events portrayed, and it could be deemed that this one is not the one we're on, that this is the completed one, thus the structure. I don't think that's the case. It would make sense in a very, you know, sensible thing to say, well, no, maybe this structure's finished because this one's complete. This one isn't complete, and therefore the structure has got to be completed for this. That's a possibility. One I have considered. One, I think I'm actually correct though in my initial thoughts that the one we're on is the downward thrust and back up. Okay, and that is purely because of this motion here. This is a downward motion, but this upward motion is not one to chuck us back up over the top that way. That's where I got a little bit confused initially. This motion is still downwards here, you know. It's not upwards. We're not tracking here. This is tracking all this side here. It's all referring to this half, not to the top half. So, and it could be that it's completed. So it's a fair argument, but I have other reasons. I won't go into them because that's a little bit long. The point is I want to talk to here is the two cycles. That's the important part. Here is our temple in central India. We're seeing here the same again, a indication of two half cycles, but this one is black. We'll cover this more in detail when I come back to that. The black one being the one that's finished, the one that is in the Serapeum as being one that's already been shown as completed, and this one is the one we're on. We're about to come up to the plane of the sun. See how we haven't completed this? There are lines missing here. See these lines in here? This one is the completed one. These lines are not here. We'll go on with another one that shows two cycles. This Egyptian relief, and always thought this was a situation where, you know, we were looking at possibility of them having power and light and so on and so on. And I certainly never doubted that the fact that there had been a past, you know, advanced race. There was so many things on the planet that are unexplained. Certainly up until now, I can say that I was as mystified as most others would be. But in the last 6 months, like I said, I would think that I have certainly in my own mind, and I hope I don't put these videos up to persuade anybody. I'm merely reading a message. I seem to, it's just before me, I just see what it is. I see this as the same thing. It's the same thing again. We see a motif where we're seeing two cycles. Okay, this is the cycle that's complete. We know how long these cycles are. They're 6,000 years it takes to go around. It's the same either way. You cannot change it because it is a natural fact. The speed, or I shouldn't say you shouldn't change it because maybe you could. The people that made our planet go around the sun in a way it's not supposed to, did so, and as crazy as it may sound, the reason in doing so to a degree, albeit the north going, north and south of that cycle, not a good place to be for the planet to be, and not a good place to be on the planet. Certainly it would have been probably better than being there the day the comets were delivered. And if you're one of the lucky people that got taken away, and I would imagine taken off to somewhere else of a realm with far more an advanced society, to be honest. I think they've just moved up the chain somewhat. I'll tell you why I think that at the end. We see the first cycle here. If we count the bends in the snake or serpent or whatever you want to call it, or a lotus flower or whatever it's supposed to represent, a light bulb, but if we count these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got 6 curves in the snake. We've got a completed cycle. We don't, it's finished. Okay, it's over. This apparatus that we see here is at the end of a cycle that it needs to be installed. This is the apparatus that I said. This is our Atlantis, our device installed to harmonise the oceans, because of what happens when we come into plane with the sun. Our magnetic plane of the sun is only 200 kilometres wide. It is, you can calculate that in the Serapeum in the manner in which it records the thrust and movement of the planet. You have been through that before? That is where I perceive, in this motif, we're seeing exactly the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, 6,000 years, but we need this installed at the end of the cycle, and this cycle has already ended. This cycle is about to end, and this is why this is here. It is saying that this is our Atlantis, it needs to be installed, and that's where it does it. I want to show you one where I believe there's a motif where we've only got the first cycle represented on its own, and there's one thing I want to show you with that. I wanted to bring this one up. This one, once again, it's one on its own. It doesn't reside, and it could imply the one we're on, okay, or it could imply the past. It's not really overly important. We're heading towards this situation here. This is where we're at. We need this to steady our oceans and tides, otherwise our coast, especially the east coast here of Australia, it will be washed away. Our towns will not exist in a little over a couple of years, I would expect. What I want you to notice here in this motif, or carving or engraving, or I would expect it to be left here by the people that tilted the planet, as I would expect most of the history or the historical things. If the people that are there do not know, and I know an Egyptologist, and I said, in Egyptology and the history that you have learnt, is there a record of the planet being tilted off its axis by 2 comets? And he said no, but he may have been not telling you the truth, who knows. What I wanted you to note in this is these 2 figures here. Okay? What are these 2 people trying to do? They've got their hands out together trying to communicate, and it's not the first time I've seen this in an Egyptian relief. There have been multiple, and we've discussed one at the end of the carry-on video. We discuss King and Queen of Egypt, and it was, I was saying this is not a motif left here or carving left by any Egyptians at all. It's a whole thing is left by the people that tilted the planet to tell us a story of what happened and create a history as such, because the one that was on the planet was non-existent, it was gone. And what is on the rocks, as depicted in previous videos, is us. Cities, roads, lights, everything. A modernised society, just the same as ours, as little as 6,000 years ago. That is what is depicted on the rocks at microscopic level. So I'm seeing this as a built history by the very people that tilted the planet. But what I wanted you to see is this. Note the effort once again to communicate halfway through the cycle. This is where they're at carry-on. This is the 2,000 year mark. This is the 3,000 year mark. This is the turn your back on it, we don't not bloody listen to you. And this queen here, when they get to the middle here, well, they don't worry about making sure that farmland out there's got grain in it. They grow cows and they kill the people and eat them, and eat the meat and do whatever, because like I said, the behaviour of the people here, and they say it's a king and queen, it's not a king and queen, it was just like this, it was, the reality is here, the people, it's us, our leaders, it's the same sort of thing, turning their back on these people and not listening to them that brought about the situation. Although, like I said, the more I go through this, I see it's more like a cycle. And it's like we're just getting, you know, you either get moved up to a realm or you do not. And the realm you're moving up to is, you know, probably a far better one and more knowledgeable and all sorts of things. Whereas the one you move to, if you are not, you're not a particularly good place to go. But that's what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing here once again the installation at the end, an attempt to communicate, and a back turn to the people that were trying to bring the message. I've just brought up the image of the timing device in the Sahuman walls in Peru. It's basically an indication where your two comets, this is the southern one which tilts the axis, this is the one in Central America which stops the axis movement. We've spoken about this before, that this is the movement down from the plane of the sun, away from the plane of the sun on our plane for 6,000 years in a downward direction, and up to here to complete that 6,000 years there. On this side here, you see that there's another 4 beyond that, and this is the other cycle, and it's marked down here with a structure here, as it is here, right? And that's the other cycle. Like I said, it is difficult to know from the Serapeum whether it was an upwards or a downward cycle, but I will show you at the end where I believe we will be absolutely correct. But like I said, that's exactly what that is, yet again, and we're in another continent now. That's 3 continents we've gone to that said there are 2 cycles, and we know they are 6,000 years long. Now I bring up the UFO disc in the wall in the temple in central India, and we discuss, as I said already, 2 cycles here. What we are seeing here, and I said to you, this is our cycle that we are not finished, okay, and that this indicates it, as does many things left here, more than one thing. I am not saying that those reliefs I just showed you in Egypt are not reflective of them having power. The rocks say they have power, just like we, on the roads, down the streets, everywhere. This is the one I said did not complete, and that there are lines to be drawn in here which is showing us the thing has not completed. I want you to note what you are seeing here on this line here and this line here. See what these black lines are here? I did electronics at school, and I can tell you now that what you're seeing there is a switch. You haven't actually got the line complete, it's a switch. And I said to you that when we cross, because the band of the magnitude of the sun is only so narrow that it is immediate. As soon as you hit the band of the sun, I'm not saying the planet rips up like this, but the magnitude it has on our oceans is immediate. I'm just going to zoom out or actually I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see those lines and those switch marks right here. See? They're just like a switch. That's exactly how you draw it in a wiring diagram, and I am certainly qualified to tell you that. And as you can see here, the lines here aren't complete. Right here, you've got the lines off this one here that's not down here. Okay, this one here, not drawn through where the switch is. So this is a cycle that's incomplete. It's the one we are on, and we are approaching the plane of the sun, which will drive our tides, like this image here. I'll insert an image just to remind you. I want to go on now to something up in the top corner. I've just come back to the quarter of the top of this disc here to show you that what we're seeing here is a pictorial diagram of exactly what Zecharia Sitchin has said from the Sumerian text, and that is that we were once a dual star system, or binary star system, and at one point, thousands of years ago, one of the stars was cast off. This is in the Sumerian text, in the teachings. And he was right, because this reflects exactly that. Thus the red line being cast out here. Okay? Which is exactly what this is doing. I want you to take note of these lines here though, and what you're seeing here. In the casting out of Nibiru, or the star, that was later to be called Nibiru or Nemesis or whatever, I want you to take note here, because there's an arrow pointing there, an arrow pointing here, and there's these, you're seeing an explosion here, or a planet that's been taken out of the picture in the propulsion of Nibiru going out of the system. I suppose this is one thing in respect, we know this, if it hit a planet going out, that the star was going out in a lateral sense in line with the plane of the sun, has it have gone the other way, we wouldn't have seen it. It probably, well, maybe it would have come back and rotated around the sun in elliptic orbit and would have caused even more problems here. So whether it was captured by Jupiter through coincidence or guidance, I do not know. But what I wanted you to know here is the black lines here. We're seeing on this side a movement, this one here upwards and that way. We are seeing a movement here downwards and this way. And we are seeing this one here, movement down this way as well. Okay, so we're seeing these lines move down. If we look over on this side, I'll just move this across a little bit so you can see this side. We're seeing the same thing reflected here. Movement up, right? A movement down and another movement down here. And what we're seeing here is the planet's rotational position in the inner solar system, and our planet, Earth, has moved in closer to the sun, which is why we are seeing this movement of this line here from there to there. And now we've got, in this instance, 3 lines, here, here and here, which are the 3 planets that we had at that point. Okay, so we've got, Mercury, Venus, Earth. So that's what's going down. Now I've come back to, zoomed in a little bit more now on the top here, where we saw the depiction of the ejection of the other sun out, and Nibiru being created in the process, or what we call Nibiru. We see these, it brings your attention by these 2 little arrows pointing to here to show you the movement, the destruction of the planet here. But in the destruction of the planet, it may be that the moon itself here, we're seeing on this side our moon here. And what happened here, how it got to be where it is. It's moved to a point of being our moon in the process, or because there's also another faint image of the moon here. So the moon that we have may very well be depicted here as being a moon of the planet that was destroyed, and that moon has then become our moon, because there's another faint moon here as well. So it may be that in this event we've always wondered how the moon has gotten to be where it is, and how it's gotten to be around the Earth. It may very well have been in this event, it was, well, as crazy as it sounds, made to rotate around Earth in the event when we are in these cycles. We come back to our parchment now, and understand there are some of you that say, Brian, hang on a minute, if that's so implementing the comet sequence here, that the middle one that landed in Western Australia, why is it represented as the biggest one? Like I said, it's how you look at the picture and the way they tear. This parchment is torn exactly the way it is supposed to be torn. It's not damaged. I said before that this movement here, with this comet being the one that hits South America and severs the Antarctic continent, is the one that moved, and the one that hit in Central America is the one that tilted it back, and that's why this tear is back here. It's torn back further than that one to reflect exactly that. It moved the axis back. It's exactly what it's doing. You can say, right, yeah, that looks like a real big one though. Well, it depends on where you look at it, because from the torn segment, it's the smallest. That one's the biggest. That's why that's torn like that, just there, to reflect that bit. And this bit here is this one here. Once again, a sequence showing that this is the smaller of the two bigger comets. The southern one, that part and that portion of that tear is what's doing. You've got 48 of these, because there's 48 minutes in the catastrophe from start to completion. It's what they've said in the pyramid, in the cross section. So therefore it is far, far, far more to do with the image on the temple wall than you would think. It is the sequence itself. And what we're seeing here in the, as I said before, the movement down here being recorded as being 6,000 years. We have 6 pillars. We have gone through a multitude of other megaliths that tell us it's 6,000 years on that cycle. The unnatural cycle off the plane of the sun is 6,000 years. So therefore it is pretty safe to say that it is not silly to sit here and assess the cycle we are on is in actual fact this cycle. Our cycle is 12,000 years, 6,000 on the unnatural cycle that we are finishing, 24,000 years, 6,000 years again. So we have got a continuation of the parchment, which is why these books are open here at this point. If I go over here, the same thing happens here. Book open on the last one gives us a half of the next 6,000 on both sides, like that. See? So what we've got is 12, 6, 24 and 6. And we'll add those years up, and we'll now know the cycle and the exact amount of thousands of years it was that our other star was hurled out of our solar system. So remember that, we've got 6 and 6, which is 12, 12 and 12, 24, 24 and 24 is 48,000 years. We have to subtract from that the 24 here because we haven't finished them yet. We are coming up. And you could say, how do I know we are coming up here, Brian? You know, and not coming up here? And that's a very good question. I would say we are centre of the parchment. The event is these two. We are here. It is possible we are here. Or not there, but it is possible we could be at the start here. I guess the relevancy there is it doesn't want to make any difference. We are coming up to a period of time of the requirement of an installation of a device to steady our oceans, which is why the message is here and why it's been left in this manner. I will come back and discuss a little bit more with this parchment later, because that is why I had to stop making the video. I had to think, why? Why are we on this sequence? I mean, it's one thing to come back and help save a planet. If we were hurled off into space, this shows us on the wall in the temple that our planet was not on the plane of the sun after this event happened. That's what it says on the temple wall. It was adrift. It was in the plane, but was not in the magnetic plane of the sun. And like I said, there are a lot of lessons in when you sit here and think of why. Why does this happen? And why here? And I'll talk population too in a minute. Why does this happen? Why? And that is why I actually had to stop making the video. I will now discuss with you population, because this parchment does show exactly that, population. So I'm just going to bring us back to the disc in the wall and show you that the only place on this image on the wall that you see this imagery, where you see an in like this and an up and out near a fan, is this one. This is where you're knocked away from it for the 6,000 years. it is the only place where it is in the whole process, and we know that the movement rotates the Earth around the Sun in a different direction. That's exactly what the process does. So in actual fact, that's exactly what this does, but what you do is you move on the black line. The black lines indicate that where they're going from one way to the other is your transitions from one movement to the other movement. So when you're up and down or out of here, you're travelling on a black line for as many, to get back over here to do your thousands of years in a lateral sense that way. And vice versa, coming back the other way to do the other ones, and that's why these tracks are in and out of this. I've tried to follow this to a point, but it really is. I have, to go through the process in a video would be a waste of time. In fact, I've sat here and watched how to do it. That's how it works. And the reason it does that is because it wants you to know that when you're doing these movements here, there's some very, very important things from the aspect of, once again, astrophysics here is the lesson in this motion here. It's saying, why is it always coming back to this one and doing it here? It's the same whether it's up or down. So in other words, the way it's designed, it's bringing your attention to the fact that it's closest to Nibiru here, closest to Nibiru here. It is both up and down. It doesn't change the axis, and it uses the same point here to say there's no difference between either of these, right? From an astrophysical point of view. That's exactly why that is the way it is. It's telling us that when we are either above the plane or our plane is tipped one way or the other, like it goes one way this way, one way that way, it doesn't make any difference, that it is the same, we are going through the very same process, and there is no difference, right? And the reason for that is, and I said to you, that I would think here we are seeing, and them letting us know, as I said to you, there's an indication to me in the length of time, in the change of the pole when you're going on the rotation on the bottom here. Like, so when you're off this, on this plane that we're looking at here, right? If we are going round the bottom, or the plane of the planet is around the bottom here, when it goes across, there is a lateral band, and that's why we're getting the pole shifts at the bottom. We're not just getting one plane of the sun, this one, which is the one we want to come up and sit on, which is where we get these installed, right? It's not that plane. This plane here, when we're off plane of this plane, we're getting taught things about what happens to the planet when we're there, right? So in other words, when we're off this plane, number one, Nibiru doesn't affect us. It doesn't affect the axis of the Earth. It doesn't tilt it. It doesn't. So there is no magnetic interference with Earth whatsoever from the Nibiru's passage through the solar system. But it's not just that. There is another thing that it's telling you, and it's the magnetic plane of the Sun in a vertical sense is much, much wider than the horizontal plane. And that is why the pole shifts down here. And I think in the question here is when we see that we're not only seeing the record here, when we looked at the top of here, remember how we see that the planet Earth moves closer to the Sun, and this is where we incur the problem with the destruction of the planet here. The movement of that would be Mercury, Venus, moving closer here, Mercury moving out, Earth moving in. And Earth moving in, we have moved, not only have that happened, that's what I'm saying, that's not the only thing that caused the problem. Praveen, and I have pointed out Praveen's name there before, Praveen Mahoney, this is his work, and it was his imagery that I've used in this video. Once again, Praveen, thanks for your efforts here, man, because if I hadn't seen this I wouldn't have known where further to go. So that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing the movement of Earth back in, but it is not the only thing that causes the problem with the magnetic plane of the Earth, and that's why I think this lesson push down, the rotation. It is not just about that, it's a whole lot more to do with the lesson that we're going to learn in the 24,000 years ahead of us. You know, because we are really approaching a very, very wondrous time I'm seeing here. We are going to be flying around in UFOs before I pass away, hopefully. I think this 17 is, at longest, it's going to be years, it's not going to be anything else, it can't be centuries. Why would they bother getting me to tell you all this and for me working it out? Like I said, this all just come from a rock, looking at a rock and realising the tilt of the globe would point me at the pyramids for an unknown reason to me, so that's why I went investigating. We've come a long way. I can't believe how far we've come, but anyway, that's what's happening here. So this is what's going down. This is actually recording and saying to us that 66,000 years ago, this here was cast out. It was our other star, and we are actually at a point now in a cycle that is completed once, halfway through the second time we are here. And we are now at that point where, like I said, these devices here have been put in, and I've said to you they've been put in 4 times. This is the 4th time. This is our time. Okay, that brings us back to this Egyptian relief, and we look at what it may possibly mean, in my opinion, in respect what we are talking about. The half cycle of the plane of our Earth being moved for 180 degrees. How does it get done? By this person who comes from this place, through this, here. He gets here and he causes the issue that puts the planet on this cycle. So he causes the issue, and then he goes back to where he came from, back to his place. The cycle has persisted. He then comes back again. Here. He puts in place, around the globe, what is required to protect it from the sun's rays or the sun's magnification. He does and puts in there what we need to protect the Earth from the sun's magnetic beam when we hit it. And then once he's got that installed, he goes back home again, which is exactly what that's saying. Once again, we have his arrival. He has set this in stone. And I'm telling you, when this bloke here sets something in stone, it generally works out the way they say. This we portray as a necklace. In this instance, it's shown as a half cycle. But like I say, in so many other things, there is something else to see. I want you to stop and think. We are counting 12 dots around there, so we are talking 6,000 years. If each one's 500, like the Serapeum, exactly the same. 12 dots. But that could also be 12 minutes. And if it was 12 minutes, what do you think that would indicate? Do you want me to tell you what it might be? And I'll give you an indication of exactly why this may be around the neck of everybody in royalty or any sort of royal figure or anything to do with Egyptian culture. It's because they didn't listen. Not necessarily Egyptian culture, like I said, they're showing highways, roads, cities, lights. All they're doing is saying the people did not listen. If you put your head there and you're looking at the winter time where he's standing, you're probably recording the sunrise and sunset there, all 12 minutes of it. Because that's probably more than likely how it's intended to be meant there. It's not a necklace, it's not around any of these guys' heads. It's there. It's a scale, a timing chart. A timing chart. That's what that is. And it is set in stone here. They're coming back here and they're putting this thing in here, which is our Atlantis. We look at this person's head. I want you to note where his ears are. Is that not like this inserted image? This is the one at microscopic level taken off one of the rocks. I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% certain. I think this is off the Sandshoe rock. You can see the image of the guy's head. It's got its ears back, up high and at the back. Maybe he gave us an image on his rock at microscopic level that's far more accurate to his appearance than what that is. I wanted to bring up this relief because there are some that believe these are tuning forks or such a thing, and they may very well be that. Okay, I'm seeing this being the installation of the device, and this at the end of this, and I've seen on even this rock here, which is the rock I got off the beach. As you can see, it's just a sandstone rock. That was the one I made the 9 from 9 video on. It had a human sacrifice on it. So yes, you may think that that is the case, but I have mentioned in my videos before, I do play music and I know what a tuning fork looks like, and it's joined at this end with a stick here and you hit it there and it rings. Something held in the hand at the end like that normally doesn't do a lot of ringing. I'll bring you in a little bit closer and you let me know what you think of them. They look like tuning forks to you when you look at them closely. I know they look like a set of steak knives to me, and this bloke here may very well be dealt with at the end of the sequence, because that is exactly what the message I'm reading on the little rock say. The he who with the knife and the sacrificial knives, just like the rock, will be dealt with at the end of the cycle when the device needs to be put in place. Now we'll go and discuss their method of population control. Now I'll bring the parchment back up now and discuss whether or not it actually has yet another purpose, a third purpose. Because the first purpose is the sequence of the comets, and then the second one is the very sequence of years we carry over to the UFO in a wall in India, in a temple in the middle of India. We have 48 men sitting on here, reflective of the 48 minutes that the entire event took to tilt the planet and get rid of everybody that was on it at the time. And I say that was on it. And like I said, there are archaeologists and those learned people that would say it is impossible for this to have happened 6,000 years ago. Like I said, when you can spin a planet round a star, they pretty much can do a lot. So I think we have to come to terms with that being the situation. I want to show you a count and do a count this side of that line, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? So we'll say there's 12 billion people on the planet, which would be pretty much right. I mean, there's no reason why there wouldn't have been. It's had a straight axis for 12,000 years with the device installed. We know that from images on the rocks. We can get that information off. We know that's for sure. So we've got a situation where we've got 12 billion people here. Okay, now at the point that this actually is moved down, alright, so in other words the event from the point in time of the event. How many people have we got here now underneath that have survived the event? We've only got 3 billion. So only 3 billion people have survived. We're not at the end of the event, right? This is at that point in time. So at the point in time when they've put people back, they've put 3 billion people back out of what was a possible 12. So they've left 9 here at this point here. So it looks like the carryover was only 3 billion, which have then endured this, which has then cut that in half to 1.5 billion people. And this is where we are. What we're seeing is the build-up of the population from this point down the bottom here, which is less than 1.5 billion worldwide, to what we have now. Now if we're coming up here on this side, how many have we got on this side here? If we count down this side of that line, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 billion. How ironic. What is world population at the moment? 7 billion. Now, of the 7 billion that we have in this line, we've got, rising from the bottom to the top, we have 4 in the top row, we have 2 in this row, 1 in that row and 1 in that row. So that's roughly, or just a bit under 8 billion. 8 billion people. This one's almost over here, right? So we're not taking very many through here, are we? There are people on our planet that would think, Brian, you're coming up with figures and numbers in calculus that reflect, well, 66,000 years cycle at this point. A perception of 33 years, 33.3 years for every degree of rotation of the unnatural cycle. And yet we have gone through a stage of learning where we know it would be without doubt there would be people that know certain aspects, and it would appear right to the very last of the story, which is, like I said, a curveball in learning to me yet again, right to the very end of what would appear to be a part 5 of a video. I thought it was only going to be one, but that's what this has done, the whole path of learning, and why I haven't been able to finish the book. And then I stop and think, why would I write a book when in reality the story is saying that we're going to have a people of beings from another world come and lay something all the way along the equator, right around our globe, because that's what our story is. The story I'm reading left here by the very megalithic buildings that the people tell us they cannot explain how or why or when. Well, we now know, at least I know why. I know why it's all here. And I'm 100% certain I'm 100% correct, only because the people that have helped me find that out are the ones that are going to come back and have to put this pipe across the equator. It is an amazing thing, and it has to sit, I would expect, on the water's surface. And as crazy as that may sound, I'll show you an image. Like I said, it pays to be observant sometimes. We'll have a look at an image on one of the things we've already put up. I just wanted to bring this image up. This was, I noticed that when, like I said, you've got to be observant with both the images on the rocks, the megaliths, the design in them. I don't know why I went on this path of adventure, but it's been one of absolute eye-opener, I can assure you. One letter that initially started, like I said, with the rock my son found. But look at what we're seeing here. See this thing here? And I saw what, I just wondered what that was. Can you see that? It's like a dome thing with like four things coming off, like a stand, like it's on a stand, you know what I mean? Like a dome or a round thing with, you know, a thing like this, and it's where it is, it's in the water, because this is where it reflects this comet in the water, and the tail of the comet, which when you actually get it in this light, it changes again, because this actually now looks like it's sort of almost built in under the water. And this may also be under the water as well, and the reason I wanted to bring that image up was because there must be some thought here. It's one thing for them to put the pipe around the ocean, but we must give thought, like I said, in their messages will be lessons and things we need to observe. I'm wondering whether that there is a device. We've got to think here. Are the oceans, or is one thing, they control and put this device in. I mean, we need to also ponder and understand that bodies of water on the planet itself could be, you know, very much so. And if they are man-made ones like dams, and we are getting water dragged from the sun in a big dam, one end, well, you could create quite a wave, even in body water like that, or the inland lakes that are in North America as well. They are huge lakes. They could create tidal waves in their own right because of the magnetism of the sun. And I'm wondering here, being such a narrow band, when we go back into that, whether there is a requirement also on a more local standard to take safety issue and respect the bodies of water that are inland, not just the ocean, because that could be what that's actually trying to tell us. Like I said, there will be those of you who will say, yes, Brian, you come up with the numbers, and you may be very well one of them, and it all may be a deceitful thing that you're doing. Listen, I'm looking at an image I've got, and you can see, because I wiggled a little light around a rock, held it at an angle that told me to, and this is what is produced. You could say it's coincidental, Brian. It is in the number of rocks and the message and the regularity of two comets, one from the south being the bigger, that is over and over and over again, and it is on billions and billions of rocks. And the answer is in the rocks, in the numbers, and the technology. It is just absolutely mind-blowing, and that's how I think it's probably the best way to finish this, finish this series of videos, because I've now come to the end of learning and understanding why it was I went on the path, and I'm absolutely now certain that I'm at the end of the period, or the end of the lesson I have to teach, I guess, if that's the case. I don't know. There are some of you, like I said, will find this rather daunting in respect the fact that we've got a situation where, from a religious aspect, but like I said, I've said before, I believe the religious aspect of what we're being shown is quite the opposite. It's not something that's confronting and totally, it's totally the opposite. These people that have come from wherever they've come from, as far away as they have come to help. And they saw not a planet in peril, in my opinion, but an actual solar system, like the inner solar system. And I am beginning to see from their efforts that we ourselves on planet Earth, and I've never quite taken in the theory of evolution with glee, even from a child. I remember the day I got taught about it at school. I put my hand up, I said, "Sir," and he's gone, "What is it, Mr. Whitten?" And I still remember the brother's face very well. I certainly can't remember his name. He said, "What is it, Mr. Whitten?" And I said, "At exactly what point in time did this ape that you talk of obtain a conscience?" And he couldn't answer the question. And he said, "Well, it's a theory, Mr. Whitten." And I just said, "Exactly." And that was from school age. I've never believed it from one day. I see with what I see before me here, the very likelihood that the Earth's population at the point in time that it was rescued and put on the planet with the device in the very first instance that we were a rescued race of people, not just from Earth, okay, because Earth was off kilter as well, so we were a rescued race of people, I would expect, from everywhere, not just our planet, the planet that was destroyed, as well as Mars, which was also destroyed in this event. And that is my theory, not one I've read from the rocks, but certainly one I would certainly think. I've never believed that 100,000 years is not enough time out of Africa or out of Australia theory or wherever it may be. I did say in an earlier video that the Australian Aboriginal culture that Ayers Rock was placed. Yes, it is, but it is an actual fact place for the very first event, which was 6,000 years, would appear to be McDonnell Ranges. So in actual fact, if it was placed, it's been here placed where it was for a very, very long time, and I would also see that the race, the Aboriginal culture here, even way before that. So, and this is going back 66,000 years, and you know, they're saying in the glass culture was certainly brought to an existence of where we are. I can't see why all four of them aren't exactly the same if they've got that period of time with the culture doing the very same thing. You cannot have the device in place without the advanced civilization for thousands and thousands of years without that being the case. And we know they were advanced in the very first instance because they were brought from every other planet. So it's been a situation where our planet has been managed by this race of beings that have come to save us. So, and like I said, in their honesty is in the number of rocks at my feet every time I go to the river. And that is how I'll leave this video, and I'll say thank you very much for your participation. That'll wrap me up for a bit. This is Brian Whitten and ET Art. Have a nice day. Bye bye.